Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Welcome to The Courage Effect. It is Suzanne, and I'm here to bring you another listener favorite. Before we dive into this episode, I want to share why I'm bringing this one back. What I didn't expect to walk away from this conversation with was a new phrase that stuck in my head and has stuck in my head for, it's been a year and a half since our conversation. 10 words to 7. That's how Fumbi Chima described learning how to be more direct. And it wasn't this massive aha or dramatic thing, but it was a quiet, deliberate step to stop padding her truth. Fumbi Chima is a global tech executive, a CIO who has led teams at Boeing Credit Union, Adidas, Burberry, Walmart, American Express, and beyond. She was born in Nigeria, educated in England, and has worked across industries and continents. And yet the conversation that we had was not about titles and it wasn't about boardrooms. It was about the courage it takes to stop dancing around your power. We talked about women at the top, what it takes to get there, and something you don't hear about so much, what it takes to stay there. We cover imposter syndrome, we talk about equity, and she says something really beautiful as well about understanding the larger global perspective. And it means that you don't have to go across the world to do that because you are surrounded by the world right now. There are people in your immediate world that you can learn from and to get that global perspective. You just have to be curious and open to listening for it and to asking the right questions. Whether this show is new to you or it's time for a refresh, I think you're really going to love this conversation. Fumbi is insightful, powerful, and fun. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Courage Effect. It's Suzanne. I'm thrilled to have you here today. I am a fierce advocate for women. It is something that I work with a lot of women in my practice. I have been on the board of a number of organizations that really support women in leadership. And I am thrilled today to have a guest who is not only an amazing leader, but is also a very fierce advocate for women as well. My guest today is Dr. Fumbi Chima. Fumbi is a strategist with global cultural understanding who's driven change and inspired high-performing, diverse teams within Fortune 500 and signature brands. Fumbi is an advocate for women of color. Born in Nigeria and holding citizenship in both the US and UK, her multicultural heritage and extensive work experience has enriched her perspectives, guiding her leadership approach in diverse global settings. Fumbi, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Good morning. Thank you, Suzanne, for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk about life and what's going on in the interesting world that we all trying to navigate through.
Yes, the interesting and challenging world that we are all trying to navigate through. I know you would agree.
It's Monday, right? It's Monday, so we can't say challenging yet because it's only the start of the week. So as my mother always said, you have to always think positive, right? So I'm not taking the challenge into it. I'm going to say it's interesting. And interesting can be, constituted as positive and negative, but I'm going to be neutral.
Well, and I appreciate that good dose of optimism as we have a conversation about courage. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You have such vast experience in leadership and as a woman in the world. When we think about women at the top, and I know that we had this conversation as we were prepping for today, I'd love for you to talk about that, because when we look at the stats in the world right now, there is not a lot of equity in the world. It seemed to be getting better in a lot of ways for women, and we have backslid in a lot of ways. So as I say, woman at the top, I'm just going to give that to you and see where you take us.
Oh, women at the top. I think there is benefits to having women at the top in leadership roles, at the board levels, across organization, because we bring perspectives. Perspectives is very unique. I think it's unique just because of who we are, right? If you think about our genetics and our brain and how it works, we always are we think holistically about things. And when you look at data, it tells you that when you have at least two women in an executive role, particularly if you're at the CEO. Look at the trend of the few CEO women
Yeah.
that still sit on their own. Their performance for those companies have, often, accelerated quite rapidly. And I think that is just a testament, not just because the company is doing well, because I know some of them that came from a turnaround and have turned it around to really become profitable. So there is something to be said about women being at the top. And if you get two or three of us together, then magic happens, because we kind of take everything. There's also something to be said about women. We're great multitaskers. So, and what I mean by that is we're usually wives or sisters or daughters, right? And so we have a lot of responsibility about having that empathy and thinking about how we care, right? So we bring that into our workplace, and we apply that into a lot of things that we do from a professional workplace, which then brings that element of success to companies, both at the profitability level and also at the people level. Because we have to remember, we can't be successful if you don't have people that work for you and work with you in those organizations. So there's something to be said about it. However, women at the top is also, and this is where my negativism comes into play, it is a lonely world out there, right? And unfortunately, there aren't that many other women at the top that you can have those conversations and kind of dialogue with to help you understand where the challenges are. So that's one aspect of women at the top. There's a lot of positive, but there's a lot of, challenges that help get there. And I think it's important to say, we can be at the top, but how do we stay at the top, right? And that's a different challenge and conversation, because I don't think many people, not that we don't have the endurance to stay at the top. I think we get frustrated and we get pushed out. And so, that empathy of let's do what is right for the company, let's do what is right for our team. When it gets too much, those women at the top then decide to step aside to do something else that becomes more meaningful. And unfortunately, that's what, it's sad. And I don't know whether, this whole notion around DEI, and we're talking about inclusive, diversity and inclusion perspective. It is nice to say it from an academic exercise. Scorecard shows we've got more women at the top and all that. The reality of it is, it's really not there, right? You and I worked in corporate place. We can turn the scorecard to read the message we wanted to read.
Yeah.
And that often signifies a positive, like we're making progress. But when you really are into it, you realize it's not as easy as you really need to. And I was reading the stats today, somebody that sent it to me, actually, not in the US, but in the UK, that there's a lot of scorecards out there, but it's now very, very apparent that it's not sustainable. And they're not seeing real reality of the initiatives that they're saying is really focused around diversity and inclusion around women, and then people of color, ethnicity, and we can talk about that later on. But it's a unique and interesting world, and I think we really need to kind of double click on it to really find out more, because 2022, is it 22, 23, the affirmative action actually brought us back, which was really sad. We had a lot of hopes, and now, who do we hold accountable, right? When the legal system also is saying, yeah, we believe in it, but it's not really an important agenda. So that topic is every day on my mind, and just I hope that my children, I have two daughters, I hope they live to see the day that we're not having this conversation. It just becomes innately natural in them. So, women at the top is good, but there's a lot of challenges to go with it.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I'm curious, for you, being in so many of the senior roles that you've been in, what are the conversations that you've had with people to make sure that you're having the right conversations? How do you get people to engage and to keep engaging?
Yeah, I think in fairness, a lot of companies want to have a conversation. And I put it that way because I think, I don't think there's any company that doesn't want to do the right thing. Right? If you don't want to do the right thing, you might not well be in existence. So we have the conversation. There's a key piece that you talked about there is engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the harder thing to do, because when you engage means you have to take action. And some of those actions are really, really, really hard. And it's hard because culturally, it's just been something, many of those organizations have worked at, been there for like 30, 40, 50, 60, 90, whatever years, and been in existence. And it has predominantly been a privileged world, right? And when you think about privileges, it's not about black or white, it's about man or female.
Yeah.
And so when you start having to rock the boat, that is when that engagement kind of backpedals a little bit. So yes, everyone has conversation, but do they really engage in a meaningful way to really do things? I think, again, that's where the conversation is to have. And some do it well, and some still have ways to go.
You're also making me think about the fact of we do a lot of like DEIB training, or like a one-time thing. And we think, oh, we've had the conversation, we've done the training, like we're good. And it's like, no.
And then that's it. Yeah.
It's like, that's just the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a really simple one is when you do promotions, you talk about everybody, but you don't step back and say, everybody I've promoted are all white men or white women. Who else have I not thought of, right? We're talking of performance, yes, but performance is in all 360 angles, and we don't look at it that way, right? And I think those are just simple things that we need to really look at. How many times do you ask a question of somebody that doesn't look like you and say, I want to learn about you. Let's go to lunch. Let's go and eat your cultural food and let me experience it. Because the more you do that, the more it becomes innately in you. Right. And I think that to me, that's true equity. Because I want to know you like I look at you. I said I was born in Nigeria. I came here. I'm lucky enough to be in a British education. I understood English. I understood all the culture. But nobody came to say, let me understand what your real culture is so they can understand how I tick. I have to adapt to them versus them adapting to me. Again, that's diversity. That's equality. And I think until we start unraveling that, the real engagement is really not going to be authentic. The intent is well-meaning. It's really hard.
It is really hard. And it's exactly as you said, though. It's not just about engaging with somebody just at that, on your terms, but on their terms, and making sure that you're opening the door to have an experience that is different from your own.
That's right.
Fumbi, we talked about you being born in Nigeria and then being raised in England. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story growing up.
Yeah, no. So it's an interesting one. At least sometimes I think that so my parents, my mother and my father, schooled in the UK, went back to Nigeria. I'm last of 6, so believe it or not, I'm baby of the family. Even though I think timeline, I feel like I'm the oldest in the family, but I am still the baby. And my father passed away when I was, middle school. In a tragic car accident. And so my mother had to take care of 6 people, of 6 children by herself. And at the time, she was just barely, she's going to be 19 now in June. So about 40 something years ago was when my father passed away. So you just imagine, she never remarried and all that. So through that was where moving from, Nigeria to the UK, because I think she thought, when 6 kids, very, myself and my oldest, we're kind of a 14 years gap. And so she flunked me off to boarding school. Probably the best thing for her, quite honestly, because I was a little bit of a prima donna kid as a youngster. So grew up in the UK, boarding school. My mother kind of did her job and worked in the diplomatic service. So we pretty much grew up there. And then I moved post that to kind of do something unconventional, what people do. I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't an engineer, I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't, all that everybody else in my family did, because that's what my parents did. I studied politics, philosophy, and a minor in economics. And quite honestly, I just did it because I just thought, God, you got to do this, so let's move on. And then through that, And post-graduating, my mother was like, if you're not going to do a PhD or anything, you need to get a job. And I was like, oh God, I thought I was just going to, live at home for the rest of my life. So I ended up going to take a role as an accountant. I worked for PW at the time, qualified. And then through that, I had an opportunity, a really unique opportunity to move into the consulting of the practice. So it's very rare moving from auditing to consulting, but I did because they needed my skills from the financial technical piece to help do a lot of translation. And I honestly thought that was the birth of my love for technology, because I started with strategy, helping people through from a financial aspect. But as you know me well, I am very curious and I really want to kind of know things and understand. So if I'm managing a strategy and people are now moving into build, I wanted to understand what that build was. So then I kind of taught myself technology. So went into programming and reference architecture and infrastructure, name it, gamut, just wanted to understand the entire ecosystem. Because if I'm going to be managing and building strategies, I need to know what it is. So I think my intersection and my acceleration into life was I knew I had to work hard. I knew I'd need to kind of almost double down, 3x what my normal folks would do, because they came from, a different background to myself. So to prove myself, did that. So having been able to speak the technology and the business language, I think it gave me a competitive advantage. And quite honestly, at the time, hindsight 2020, almost 30 years into it now, I was like, oh my God, if I had known, if I had that coaching, I would have figured it out. And so that's where my career kind of spun through, because now I am in the intersection between business and technology. I still understand technology and business, so I think it brings me good skills. And as a CIO, most people don't have that element. So I think that it brings it into, and again, if you think about my role in disruption and transformation, that's really what it is, bringing all that in there. So that's really been my career. But I think also one of the things is, as that career, people I speak to go, was it planned? I'm like, no, it wasn't. It just happened, right? If I look back now and say, if I had to tell my 21-year-old self again, should I have had it planned? Yes. And how would I have done that? I would have had great people around me that would plan my life, not plan, but help me navigate my career through. Because of course we've made some good choices and some not so good choices that will help me plan it. But I think the most important piece of it is also not being scared to talk about where your vision and your ambition is. That, I do want to work for so and so criteria company. I do want to work for blah, blah, blah. And my target is to do that. Or I do want to be the blah, blah, fill in the blank, officer of the company. I think I held back on that. I ended up landing myself in those roles, but it wasn't because it was intentional. And even when I landed myself in that role, my humility sometimes didn't even let me appreciate it or celebrate it. It was just like, oh my God, now you're in there. You got to kind of work really gingerly and quietly around it, because, you don't want to show off, right? And I think women, that self-confidence.
Yeah.
Right. Many times we lack it. So, and it's not self-confidence. It's just like, I have a vision. I have an ambition. I want to live my ambition. But I find that many women don't want to talk about what their ambition is, because it's either seems very egoistic, arrogant, just beyond the reputation or what we are being perceived to be as women. And so that becomes a shortcoming. But yes, I've risen through the ranks pretty quickly, but I think those skills that I bring to bear, and I continue to do. I'm a disruptor, I'm an innovator. I always bring the first in everything in organizations that I work. I have no fear in doing that. But I think over time, most recently, is when I've become more confident and comfortable in my own skin, in my own body. Yeah. That yes, I have accomplished. Yes, I am grateful for where I've done, and I've made an impact, and it's okay to celebrate and talk about it. But that's something that we often don't do.
How have you done that? How have you been shifting from being maybe too humble or playing small to really owning your voice and speaking to what you want? Was there something specific that happened?
Yes and no. I mean, I think one just goes with experience and maturity and age, and you just realize it's like wine, right? The the older they get, the more mature and fuller body it gets. And you just take it for what it is. So I've learned that I just have to be myself. I think the piece of it, I mean, I've kind of done it in a subtle way. I've always been an advocate around diversity and inclusion and all that, but I've said it in a more respectful way. I think really after 2020, quite honestly, I just thought, you know what, we gotta be, if we cannot be bold and talk about issues every day that is around us, and we pretend it's not around us, but we live it every day, we face it every day. What am I going to be telling my children? I mean, my children now are now about to enter the workforce professionally. And they're seeing me and saying, yeah, mom, you kind of said, I mean, the Gen Zs of this world, they just tell you, right? And they hear me on calls and go, I think that's what you're trying to say, but why weren't you direct? I'm like, well, you just gotta, talk about that. And they're looking at you and going, but why? And I self-reflect and go, actually, you know what? It took me 10 words when I could have really used 3. And those 3 could have been really direct and be, straight to the point. And I said it in 10, and then I spent another 15 minutes thinking, did that message really come through? Right? And then when I started being bold and being direct around it, I realized, yes, it does make people uncomfortable, but I've been uncomfortable for all my life. So why can't somebody else be uncomfortable? And really, let's have that conversation. And that's really, when I start seeing that, I was like, okay, now I'm making a difference, right? And that gave me more boldness and courage to talk about it. And I'm not shy of talking about it anymore, right? If companies don't want to talk to me because I'm talking the facts in the most respectful, candid, data-driven way of how to improve, then they don't need me. I don't even want to be there, right? And so that is about making a difference. I want to create a legacy to say, if I just save one starfish out of the thousands, at least I've saved one starfish. And we really need to try to find out, how do we wrestle this issue of women, of diversity, of inclusion, about progression, supporting each other and standing on each other's shoulders to rise up and be comfortable and confident and celebrate each other in there. And if we don't, let's challenge each other. If we don't do that, then the world's not going to change.
Yeah.
And I want to be known to be an advocate for that. It gives me peace and joy to be able to do that. And even say it on the call today. It's like, whoo, therapy. It's honestly, it is actually, it's important, right? That we have to. And the more we talk about it, the more things will be done.
Yes. On so many levels. Yes. And how amazing that your daughters were encouraging you, or basically not even deliberately, but just saying like, okay, what, like, it's almost like you were dancing around your power or what you wanted to say.
Because many times, there is notion around the imposter syndrome, right? And I think we all have it one way or the other, and we don't want to talk about it, but we all feel it, right? I'm saying, yes, I know, but I don't want to piss them off because, culturally, organizations culturally, we're all about community, we're on by empathy, but then we don't really, with collaboration, and we want to collaborate, but we don't want to talk about the difficult issues to solve. And you don't want to disrespect anybody or make everybody feel comfortable. So the political dynamic of a corporation is even higher than we think. So yes, I have to find a way to say it without seeming defensive or being antagonistic or saying, oh God, I'm finding the pity game, in a constructive way. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. That's not what they're seeing. So that's that slight difference. Would I change it? Maybe I'll move from 10 words to 8. Or maybe 7, but I won't move to 3 because I don't think I have to bring everybody with me. And I think saying those 3 words will put people out, right? Versus encourage people to participate and lean in to do it. So from 10 to 7, I think that's progress.
10 to 7. I'm going to remember that.
30% reduction.
How do we cultivate a global mindset? I know that that's something that's really important in the work that you do. And I think that as we look to change, as we look to drive change, we really need to be doing it at a local, but also a global level. But there is that mindset, I think, that really needs to shift for us as individuals and the broader impact that we have. So how do we cultivate a global mindset?
I think when we think global, like everyone automatically thinks, oh, it's you got to live in a different country or experience different life. Global doesn't necessarily mean that. Global just means having a different mindset. So even when just understanding how Suzanne thinks, right? Suzanne comes from a different background, from Fumbi, from James, from Sarah, from Makita. Just understanding that, and that you're not sitting in your own bubble, and just having the ability to be curious and ask, and just like, this is my idea, but other people around me, that to me is global, right? Because not everybody can afford to buy a plane and go to Japan, and not everybody can have or have the experience to go and live in Asia for 3 years. So, but just there's global around us, and my neighbor is very different from me. So let me talk about that. So in the workplace, it's the same thing. We say we are all diverse. Okay, then let's bring that diverse thought into the piece. Everything is done in a certain location. Wonderful. But what if other people from other locations come in to do? How would that impact them? That innately is global. So I think it's just being able to think outside of your own sphere of influence, and not always do things because that is just the way you've done it, and cultivate other insights. That's the simplest way to do it.
So really leaning on curiosity is what I'm hearing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And being open, right?
Yes.
I used the example earlier on where I said, I've had to learn, but no one's actually said, okay, that culture, what does it mean? That food, what do you guys eat, right? How spicy? It's just different, right? And, certain cultures are very subservient to their men because that's just culture, but just ask why.
Yeah.
Feel comfortable in doing that. I grew up with being in a household of saying you have to be heard. I mean, you have to be seen, not heard, when the older people in there. So when the older people are in the room, even now, my parents' friends are in there. I go and I greet them and I walk out of the room. It's just innate to give them the respect to have the conversation. I'm just not going to sit there. That's culture. That's global. It's simple things. But somebody coming in and say, "Why did you leave? You couldn't." I have to explain, but they asked me, and then they'll now know, right? And that experience will then allow them to maybe ask somebody else, well, "What's that culture like in yours? From where you come from?" That thinking, you bring it to the workforce. It allows you to really, really have an open perspective.
I love that you're also anchoring it on why, because that's one of the things that, I mean, I've seen that numerous times in my life and also in organizations, right? Like we just do something because we do it. It's like, well, but why are we doing it? And when we actually step back to investigate, I think it's important for us to analyze why we're doing it. But I think you bring up a really good point too, is how do we also ask people that are from these cultures so we understand their culture, but then maybe they are thinking about, well, why is that in my culture? Because there's so many things that I don't think about the why until somebody from the outside of my brain and my world just asks that simple question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it is very different. But sometimes people are even scared to even tell you why, because they think you're going to judge them. So you've got to really lean in and be authentic and show that you really want to learn and experience it. And I think then you get a lot out of it.
Yeah. And I'm also blown away by the fact that you said you taught yourself technology. How did that happen? How did you teach yourself technology?
Night classes, girlfriend. Night classes. I think I even have books I'm looking at my office now that I still have, like my networking for dummies and C++ for dummies. I mean, I would sit there, read those books. Barnes and Nobles, there wasn't website then. So you go
Yeah.
to Barnes and Nobles, you buy it, you do it, and then they had certification, right? I learned ABAP. I did SAP R2, R3 certification, like folders, 6 week classes. You go in, you learn at night, and they said exams. I had to. I'm managing people. I don't know whether they told me it's going to take 6 weeks to build or 3 months. How do I know? I've written the paper for them, right? So if I don't understand it myself, it's hard for me. It's not a trust thing. It's just I'm a consultant. I'm serving the client, so I want to make sure that we're giving them the best and best quality, and have the right team for me, with me. So if I don't know it, it's hard for me to learn and to lead. Doesn't mean that's leadership, but that's my leadership one. I kind of need to, like my kids, when they were babies, I had to first taste the food, no matter how horrible they were, to make sure the temperature and everything before I feed. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I'm sad to say that we are running out of time and we're going to wrap. But a few things that I heard you say, not being scared is really the first one that just rises, that rises to the top above all. And the whole idea of planning, but still allowing for things to happen. So Fumbi, any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Before we say goodbye, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think the world is in a better place for you and I, and for since we're even having this conversation. I'm so excited, and there's so much exciting things to come. Right? Think about AI, think about technology, think about social economic issues that we all have to wrestle with. But every day we have a breath to wake up and be happy. I think there's a lot to be grateful for. And if I can save that starfish, I'm all about it. So it's about being positive and looking for positive ways to improve.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being a positive force.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. If you're looking for a leadership coach, maybe a speaker or a consultant to help you or your team be more courageous and adaptable, we would love to have a conversation. More information is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. You taking a few minutes to rate or review your favorite episodes or share them with people in your universe makes a big difference. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more information about the show, me, our amazing guests, or you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, please contact us via our website at thecourageeffect.com.